Hey everybody, it's Jazz here. So today I'm going to help you get out of your head. I want to talk about some language learning processes that actually keep people stuck. Before, I am a psycholinguist. That is what I do independent research on. My simple definition is the psychology of language learning. What I've really come to understand, especially with working with my students, is that there are common roadblocks that prevent people from being able to move forward, or there's certain things that just keep them stuck, or they just might be in their head. And so I'm trying to help you get out of your head on that. So the first thing that I constantly see, translating in your head can take a lot of time. It slows you down in comprehension. So a lot of times if you're talking to someone and you're listening to them speak, and I got this one word and then I'm kind of stuck on what that word, because you're trying to translate word for word, most likely. I see that a lot with my students. I'll give them a passage to read. Okay, I'm like, okay, so what did you read? And they'll say this, that, and the other. They'll go word for word for word. That doesn't help you at all because you're translating word for word. A lot of languages don't have the same grammatical structure, or they may not have the same expressions. They may not have the same idioms. They may not have the same whatever. Like the word, like when you're trying to say like pay attention, other languages don't use that word. English, we're saying pay attention, like paying. And other languages that doesn't exist. So in French, it's fais attention, to make attention. And then sometimes in Spanish, you might hear pongan atención, which is like to put attention on something. So sometimes things don't actually translate the same way. And it's the same thing with subtitles. A lot of times, I actually went through this exercise with a student. When you're looking at subtitles, especially on movies, on anything that's dubbed over, a lot of times you'll notice, and I think when you get to a certain point, you'll notice this, but a lot of times the subtitles and the actual target language, they may not be exactly word for word. They may not be precise. Sometimes it's a generalization. Listen to the entire thing of what they were saying. And of course, and mainly focus on those things that you understand. I understood this word. I understood that word. They told me this, or they did this gesture, or they pointed towards something. So I'm assuming that this is what they're generally talking about. The things that when you learn words like vocabulary, the best way to learn that is not from L1 to L2. It is best to learn that just straight to L2, your target language. So when you look at things like this computer mouse, you don't need to be like mouse to souris. You don't need to learn from English to French. You just learn it from the French part. It's like une souris. And you're like, okay, that's what that word is. You want to learn the vocabulary directly from images best as you can. A lot of times I always recommend YouTube channels or any type of resource where they teach the language in the language, because that way eventually you kind of get used to it. Nodding along and just kind of like saying that you understand or that you agree to something that you actually have no idea. You just don't want to do this because you really want to develop some confidence to advocate for yourself. So a lot of times when people think like, oh, look, I just, yeah, yeah, I'm going, yeah, and I have no idea what you're saying. And a lot of times in your mind, you're thinking about the fact that you don't know what they're saying instead of actually paying attention to what they're saying. So that is a big mental block. There are times where I'm like, I'm going to understand what they said. And then my thoughts are just overshadowing what they actually said. I'm not paying attention, because I'm too busy thinking about the fact that I don't know what they're saying. You really just want to get out of that level of thinking. You want to focus on what are they saying, and don't agree to everything. That can be dangerous in certain situations, especially if you don't know what they're asking you to do, especially if you're in a foreign country. So a lot of times you might ask for clarification. Okay, is this what you're telling me? Or this is what I understood. Like learning how to say those things, like those sentence starters. And you use the vocabulary that you have to really be able to dive into that. And a lot of times people like to play it safe. I know that sometimes when people are in discussions, they have tendencies to just sit and listen. And they're like, again, then that mindset keeps coming up again. I don't know what I don't know what they're talking about. I'm just sitting here. I mean, I kind of started out that way when I was studying abroad. Because when I was in France, I remember being at this church and I was invited with some other young people, like young adult people, to go hang out. And I remember they were all talking amongst themselves. And of course I was silent because I was just like, I am listening, because that was the first time I had ever been out of the country. And I was trying to get my brain accustomed to listening to it so I could create a response. And it's not a bad thing. But a lot of times, like when you have something where you're sitting at the dinner table and thinking, I have something I really want to say. I understand what they're talking about, but I don't know. I just feel like I'm not comfortable sharing what I have to say. I had this happen with a student of mine for German. I remember at the end of the session, I said, I feel like you want to say more, but you're using simple sentences. Like I remember we were talking about The Walking Dead. He kind of gave me a simple answer. And I said, I feel like you have more to say on that. You're just using a simple answer. And he's like, yeah, I really wanted to say that after this person left, left the show, then this happened. I said, well, then we're going to work on that. So I think that if you don't know, especially in a learning setting, it's like, I don't know, this is what I want to say. And then figuring out how to say that. So a lot of these things might come up, like there's sometimes where you might come up in a conversation, a word, and you're like, I have no idea what that is. And that happens. And that's what effective translation tools are for. It's not about knowing everything. And I want you to be able to build confidence so that it's not about, oh, I don't know how to say this correctly. It's not, is this correct? It's, can I be understood? Grammar is great to know, like so that what you're saying kind of makes sense. But sometimes if it's jumbled up, it's okay. The point is the other person just needs to be able to understand what you're talking about when it comes to speaking. I hope that those help you if you have any of those mental roadblocks. And I'll see you on the next video. Bye.